All right, thank you and for coming today. It's my pleasure to be able to kick this off. Little known fact is that I got my master's degree under Hani Mamasani when he was at UT Austin. And then I came to Northwestern before him and got my PhD under Frank Koppelman, at the time worked at United. So it really does feel like I'm coming home today. Thank you for the invitation. So I'm going to talk about innovations in airline revenue management since 2020. And one of the things that Airlines for America does is they come out with a weekly status report on how the airline industry is doing from the US carrier perspective. So I like this chart because it really shows 0 is the baseline demand. It emphasizes that in the airline industry, never before have we taken such a significant and sustained loss in airline travel. And 2 years later, we're still recovering, but recovering is coming back at different rates. Mexico, for instance, beaches, outdoor areas, is above where it was pre-pandemic. As of last week, US domestic travel was only down 6%. Europe for the summer is on fire. So if you want to go to Europe, book quickly is my recommendation on that. But we do see, for instance, in Pacific, where we still have lockdowns in China and other things, we are significantly down 80%, right below where we were pre-pandemic. So never before, again, have we seen this, record levels. And in this situation, there were different things that I wanted to do. So the other role I have is that I'm president of AggieForce, a nonprofit organization of about 2,500 members worldwide. A lot of them are from the airline industry. And I viewed our importance from 2020 to 2022 is basically documenting the industry response to COVID, right? Let's do it, see what innovations are coming up, et cetera. So we have been sort of taking the lead on documenting the industry response. One thing we did last year then is, because everything's online, it's nice because you can actually watch and see all of the presentations, right, instead of traveling. So we ended up, for AggieForce, myself, Virginia Lurkin, and Lavanya Marla, publishing an overview article in Operations Research Forum that really took what was going on at AggieForce in terms of technical presentations, sponsor presentations, et cetera, and captured the ideas and thoughts from multiple airlines from throughout the world. So our panels really did represent a wide range of airlines and sponsors. So one of the things that we saw is that there are changes in demand that are reshaping the industry. One thing at the beginning was that the lead times for bookings shrunk, meaning if there was an average of about 80 days before the pandemic, we were seeing 30 days earlier in. People wanted to book at the last minute. They didn't know whether or not the area was going to be a hotspot for COVID. People were traveling, for instance, for personal events that they had to go to, like funerals. We were seeing healthcare workers move around, right, where the needs were. So there wasn't a lot of advanced planning going on. The other thing the airline industry did is they realized that travelers needed a lot of flexibility. So exchange fees went out the window. What that means now, in terms of what you can do, is if you're looking for a flight, my recommendation is book early. And then just keep watching the prices. Because without an exchange fee, if the price goes down, you can get the lower ticket and then apply the fare difference towards future travel on that airline. So we're giving a lot more flexibility coming in. And then the other thing is that, I say it's this whiplash effect, right? Borders open and demand surges. Flights would sell out in some areas within hours. Borders close and you would see an influx of cancellations. So from a data perspective, we were seeing patterns that we had not really seen before. Everything changed, right? You can imagine we are faced with a lot of different decisions. Some of these, are even outdated now. But the questions became, where should we fly? Business travel basically evaporated, right? We saw a shift towards a lot more leisure travelers. Is historical data worth anything? Can we even do forecasting? What is demand going to be? Manpower planning, or looking at staffing levels, became much more of a challenge because you didn't know when demand was going to come back. We did have in the US the payroll support by the government, but there were delays in when that happened. So if you're an airline, it's very difficult to know when to pull the trigger, right, in terms of offering retirement packages or deciding furlough. So it's really how many crew do you want when you're parking your aircraft. To put this in perspective, COVID happened in February. By May, US carriers have parked about half their fleet. So 50-some% of all aircraft were not in active service. So never before has the airline industry ripped out 50% of the capacity, and then never before has the airline industry ramped up half of that the following year and then half of that the given year. So you can just think about this whiplash happening everywhere. And even simple things like putting things back in inventory, guess what? Aren't enough simulators to get pilots recertified on the aircraft because we didn't plan for putting 25% of the fleet back in a given year. So you just see these types of challenges going in, with the industry. So some innovations in demand modeling that I'm sure my colleagues and other panelists will touch on more than I am is, one of the questions is, all right, can we even use the past data for forecasting, right? So looking last year. And the answer to that was yes. There was some innovations going on. Fig and Whitman was one presentation given at AggieForce that thought about decomposing the forecast into what they called resilient and volatile components. Resilient was seasonality, for instance, tended to be the same. People were still traveling for Thanksgiving. People were still traveling in the same seasonal patterns that we would see pre-COVID. So you could bring those pieces into the forecast. Maybe instead of like a volatile component, while you still had the booking curve compressed close to departure, you could still use prior information, but just maybe do more compression on it. So there were some things going on there. The other big innovation we saw is that there were a lot of new data sources that were brought in for forecasting. And airlines used everything from TSA volume counts, percent of the population vaccinated, number of COVID-19 cases, percent purchasing Wi-Fi on board was an indication of business leisure mix, and many other data sources. But shopping data seemed to be the key that many of the airlines found, especially for an increase in forecasting accuracy. So here are some quotes. The first is from Alaska Airlines, and they said that during the first and second waves in the US, we saw a lot of correlation in booking searches in coronavirus dashboards. The big breakout term was vaccine appointment. So they took these trends and incorporated them as 1 week leading indicators on the bookings. Basically, as soon as you were vaccinated, you were going to travel. And then we saw some methodological advancements as well out of Sabre, combined shopping data with historic bookings, used machine learning, and was able to reduce the mean absolute percentage error from 6.3 to 17.2. So we're starting to see innovations there. And then also Richard at Sabre gave presentations describing how shopping data could be used for dynamic pricing and availability in other applications. So looking ahead, one way that this was described to me is that, if you have your demand go down to 5% of what it used to be, you're actually in a position you can start taking some risks that you may not have been willing to do beforehand, because it's not like you're going to lose a lot of money, right? Versus if you're bringing in 95%. And so one good thing that came out of the crisis is that you were seeing a lot more interest in dynamic and continuous pricing, but there was also this atmosphere that, yeah, we can start taking risks or maybe do things because, again, we don't have a lot of demand or a system where we're going to disrupt a lot of passengers if we do something wrong. I would say there's a sense of that there is going to be a new normal after the pandemic. More flexible products, shortened booking lead times, and uncertainty in demand until we get closer to departure. Many airlines I mentioned are placing a greater emphasis on dynamic pricing and continuous pricing. And there's new approaches being developed to use simulated data as complements for RM control. If I don't have data, I can create it through some of these more advanced techniques. If you think about the news right now, there are a lot of connections between revenue management, scheduling, and operations, and Florida is getting a lot of attention right now, right, in terms of delays and everything going on. The article on the left is saying, well, JetBlue is planning to expand, but now they're cutting back to no more than 5% of their growth, and there's a meeting next month, or I guess it's this month now, where FAA is calling together the airlines to really discuss the disruptions in Florida. So, what's going on, right? A lot of blame going around, but basically what's going on is that people want to go to Florida. It's a beach, destination, which has been very popular. And so if you look at it, the number of flights and the number of passengers going in, even though domestic demand is down 8%, it's not consistent. Florida's way up. So you got West Palm Beach up 132%, Miami up 113%, Tampa 107%. Got a lot of people going into Florida, more flights. And then when you have thunderstorms ripple through, again, at the beginning of this month, delays out of Florida were about 25%. Average delay was 62 minutes and canceled flight was 6%. So these operational, big operational challenges. And, I sort of view it as right now we're finding a new balance. And I know that sounds odd, but we're finding a new balance because I really have two decisions. One is I can decide to put aircraft into regular scheduled service. That's great for passengers because they're getting to go where they want to go, lower fares, right, if I offer more seats. But on the other hand, I don't have as many aircraft or crew ready in reserve or ready if something goes wrong. And I think for me personally, and panelists may disagree with this, I think the balance is shifting because the other thing that's going on is that we lost a lot of expertise during COVID through retirement packages, et cetera. So beforehand, even in FAA, thinking about air traffic controllers, they knew how to, muscle memory, right? They knew how to go in and manage delays very well. They've lost a lot of senior expertise as well. And frankly, we haven't been managing big delays under heavy flights for 2 years. So in some ways, I think the industry, personal opinion, is rethinking this or finding this new balance with a new workforce. So looking ahead, I expect to see more coordination between current demand and capacity decisions across departments. We are seeing closer collaborations between RM and scheduling. We're also seeing really more focus or emphasis on robust scheduling. So how can I plan schedules that are resilient to different demand assumptions or different staffing assumptions going on? And I would say I'm also seeing the role of big data is increasing and in some ways being used to train more junior staff. This comes out of American Airlines as using historic data for how their operation controllers managed delays in the past on flights to come up with training recommendations for their new traffic controllers internally, or the flight managers. So what lies ahead for 2022? I did mention that we were seeing some differences in the workforce. Again, we've lost quite a few people. I do like the quote from the Georgia Center of Innovation to put it in perspective. 17,000 employees on Delta chose to depart from the company. Average tenure was 25 years, so you're looking at 400,000 combined years of service to Delta that, so quote unquote, walked out the door. That's, again, you got training coming in with new folks. Reactivating aircraft, we parked them all. Getting them back in is expensive. Going through the maintenance requirements, retraining. We are, I think, on the tail end of the workforce shortages. There was a big push last December in that to really get a lot of people back online. Hiring bonuses were very popular. A lot of the airlines are going through, union negotiations now, like Delta. So we are, again, seeing, I think, some relaxation on the workforce. But again, it is this early retirement package, as I've mentioned, but I think things are going to be a little bumpy this summer as we're ramping back up, because I still think we have a little bit of learning left to do. Big unknowns is, I think there's a general sense we're probably not returning to the past, but a new normal. And it's unclear how we're going to manage an environment where, again, we don't have restrictions on products. Unclear what business travel is going to look like. That's the big unknown. Leisure's back. We see a lot of it. Even higher willingness to play on the leisure. Unclear if business travel is going to go back to the same level it was, or if it's going to be different. So mixing business and leisure. Or now that everybody's doing remote work, maybe I go into the office, once a week, or I bring all my members in for a big event, once every quarter. So things may change there. And from a methodological perspective, there's a lot of interest in working on this continuous pricing and continuous optimization. And one of the key things we're seeing is that it's a lot faster to solve these. So if we are able to do, continuous optimization, there might actually be more integration problems or more integration opportunities with other sides of the business. And I think we're going to hear more about that from other panelists. All right, so thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to hand off now to Eric.